Welcome to Dance Umbrella International Festival, London, 2021. My name is Freddie Opoku-Addaie, Artistic Director and Chief Executive of Dance Umbrella. Welcome to Choreographer's Cut. This is our second edition of Choreographer's Cut. The first one was last year during the pandemic, where we had our first digital festival. Obviously, this is our second one. It gives me great pleasure that we get to invite wonderful choreographers and to find out a bit more about their practice and the process of how they get to where they get to with their choreography that we see in front of us in this work. The work we'll be looking at today is of Claire Cunningham. Claire is a performer and a creator of multi-interdisciplinary work who's based in Glasgow, Scotland. Cunningham's work is often rooted in the study and misuse of her crutches and the exploration of the potential of her own specific physicality, with a conscious rejection of traditional dance techniques developed for non-disabled bodies. It gives me absolutely great pleasure to invite Claire Cunningham. Hi, Claire.
Hi, Freddie. Thanks for inviting me.
No, thank you very much. And no pun intended with the work we're going to be looking at. So the work we'll be looking at today is, thank you very much. It will be great to hear about the process before the work manifested into the studio and what it became as a performance that was presented as part of Manchester International Festival. Which year was it again?
2019.
2019.
It feels much longer than that right now, but
yes,
it was just 2019.
Yeah, there's been a little bit of an interval since then, hasn't there? A long interval since then.
Bit of a pause, intermission.
Yeah. So what was the inspiration for the work? Thank you very much.
I think it was one of these things that kind of was starting in little fits and little connections over many years, actually. And it started really from, there was some sort of moment where I had really liked Elvis. The whole work is sort of related to Elvis Presley and Elvis Presley tribute artists, but I guess it starts also with a love of Elvis that I had when I was a teenager, that I reference a little bit in the show, as a singer, because I trained as a singer and I liked him as a singer, but then becoming a sort of dancer and choreographer, I sort of rediscovered him, I'd say about 6 or 7 years ago again, and began to look at him a bit with a kind of choreographer's eye. And I began to be really interested in how he moved. And there were certain things that I realized. There was something I thought was interesting about, he's maybe one of the few individuals that's quite famous for how they moved. And quite recognizable for how they moved. There's a lot of people that get famous for how they sound, but there's less people I think are quite globally known for how they move or have that set of movements that people could just sort of impersonate. And they're very, it's quite difficult to go anywhere in the world and people don't, recognize a bit of Elvis, even now, decades later. So I was interested in somebody that was kind of so recognizable, but also dangerous for the way that they moved, had been quite provocative. And so I began to look at that and really began to see it through this sort of, I guess, quite a sort of disability politics lens as well. And the way that he moved in the 50s, being like, oh, actually, there's a lot here of qualities that I recognize from disabled bodies, of being sort of bent lines and bent limbs and qualities of shaking or qualities of being perceived as an out of control body or out of balance and out of kilter and these things. And so I began to sort of look at him that way and be like, oh, there's a lot of resonance that I see with disabled bodies and movement of disabled bodies. And then, I was like, well, how do I see this? I didn't want to watch it on video so much, and discovered Elvis tribute artists and went to the Porthcawl Elvis Festival in Wales, which is a pretty extraordinary thing to go to in life.
Sorry, just to ask again, in Wales?
Wales has one of the Europe's biggest Elvis festival is held in this little seaside town in Wales, and it's Yeah, it's pretty remarkable.
Who would ever would know that?
I don't, well, a whole bunch of Elvis fans now. It's like really, I mean, it's sold out years in advance, the whole time books. It's enormous within this. It's like anything, when you find a subculture of something, you realize it's really big.
Yeah.
But if it's not on your radar, it's, yeah. So it was really fascinating that there was this whole sort of culture there that I hadn't met. And what I recognized also when I went there was there was a community. There was also this sense of being understood somewhere and not elsewhere. People would be made fun of or seen as what they loved was seen as ridiculous or not important. But when they all come together in this place, it's respected and you're part of a community. And that was something I also really recognized from sort of disability community as well, of what that is to find your people, you know. And so, I started interviewing these tribute artists and just sort of, found it really interesting and really fascinating, but really specifically asking them about movement and how they had learned the movement and really enjoyed it. And so eventually it became an idea to make an ensemble show, which was really the first time I'd chosen to put an ensemble together. And the way that I did it was that I specifically set all 4 of us as performers up in lessons 1-to-1 with different professional tribute artists. And so the show is really built around all of us sharing what we learned from these tribute artists. And a lot of my work, from early days, my work was really built around my own biography.
Yep.
And then my later work has been much more sort of built around interviewing and conversation with people and about really encountering people from sort of another walk of life or another part of life that I haven't sort of engaged with, and finding connections with people I wouldn't maybe perceive I have a connection with. So it was interesting to share that method with the performers and kind of send them out as researchers in their own right.
Yeah. You talk a lot about this objectifying gaze as well in your practice generally. So how was that going into that space in Wales, and also kind of trying to, how was that? Because it must have been completely, well, it's removed from what your practice normally, because it's normally from your own experiences in that way. So how was that navigating that into the work?
Yeah, it's funny. There was a way in which I became maybe less remarkable in
What do you mean?
There's something really liberating actually, because like going to Porthcawl, like everyone's just looking for the Elvises, and they're these mostly all men, pretty much all a lot of mostly all white guys at that particular festival, all walking around dressed up to the nines, but you're kind of Elvis spotting around the town, and then there's lots of other people are in lots of costumes, 50s clothes or Hawaiian clothes, and so it's interesting to kind of go and be like, oh, I'm not so much of a spectacle as maybe I sometimes am in this context, because people are not staring at me as the disabled person or my colleague Kaz that I was with. So there was something quite liberating about that, of like, oh, great, somebody else gets gets stared at. But again, that was, for me, that was also what I was interested in. Like there was that sort of shared sort of understanding of like, that was kind of what was one of the things in the show as well, like this understanding of being a spectacle, as disabled people, like quite often you become a spectacle when you arrive in a space, whether that's public transport or a theatre space or whatever, and you might as well be wearing an Elvis jumpsuit, is kind of the way I felt about it. Like sometimes you feel that sort of remarkable in a way that maybe you don't want to be. And so that was kind of also something that we were kind of playing with a little bit in the show, of what that feels like to be stared at. And performing disability actually quite often as well, like how you're being perceived as performing disability to the satisfaction of normative society or not,
So that must have been it was a conscious decision to be in that space as well. And actually this leads us really on to the first part of what we're going to see end of framing, you would say the setup of the space as well, that is not the traditional, which I'll get you to talk about a bit more. And then the section you have chosen, which is called the Bad Boy Solo, because you talk about a lot of well, it is very male heavy, white male heavy in these spaces as well. So it'd be great. Shall we look at that first clip, and then we can talk about the setup and how that came from going to Wales. So just before this, there was you and the other performers just navigating the space before you come into the stage, yeah?
Yeah, so I chose to make a site-specific piece as well. So this was a first for me as well in this sort of scale. And I wanted somewhere that had that feeling of like a club, not a nightclub, but maybe more that sort of working man's club or a cabaret space, the kind of places that tribute artists actually play. You know, there's a bar at the back of the room, there's a big dance floor, a wooden dance floor. And yeah, over the years, I've moved more and more away from proscenium arch theatre setups to try and find these much more egalitarian setups where there isn't so much that thing of the hierarchy of a performer up on a stage, and being really interested about how to get closer with audiences and create more intimacy and trust in a consensual way. So yeah, the space is set up on audience on three sides with sort of tables, and then here our sort of special part of the show, or sort of special piece of set, is that we created this little, what's a reference to the 68 Special light up stage. So 68 Special was a famous television comeback show that Elvis did in 1968, where he wore all this black leather. And it was the first thing that I saw as a teenager on the telly years later that kind of really caught my attention. And he had this beautiful light up little stage with an audience all around it. And so there are lots of things in the show that Elvis fans kind of have a lot of references to and can recognize, that are not necessary for everyone to know. But this little stage is somewhere that becomes quite important a lot, and we go back to a lot. And so this opening solo is me particularly sort of sharing the sort of references to this 50s vocabulary that Elvis had a lot, and this idea of these sort of bent limbs, and also like he would do things that are almost like limping, sort of dragging his leg, and for me are very, very sort of Crip sort of qualities, and a sort of desire to sort of reclaim that for myself in a way, or to sort of relate to that. And this sort of, there's lots of things about his 50s vocabulary of being like really on his toes and really off balance. That is very much a lot of the way that I play anyway with the crutches. It's something that I get really into and play with a lot. And over this, so we have music through the show that's made by Matthias Hermann, who I've worked with a lot. And he's made all these beautiful rearrangements of Elvis tracks. So this is actually a rearrangement of Jailhouse Rock that's kind of going on in the background.
Oh yeah, nice.
And over it, every so often you're hearing there's a voice of Lee Crow. So what was nice actually as well, in the Elvis artists that we feature in the show as voices, as voiceovers,
they're all impersonated.
Yeah. So some of there's a bit of sort of like, some of them don't like being called impersonators, some of them don't care. It's all a bit.
Oh, it's the.
There's a whole thing there of like, yeah.
Are they like the real Elvis? Can you say that?
Well, yeah. It's, most of them are really not precious about it. They're pretty chill about it. But yeah, there are certain things between tribute artist and impersonation or artiste, which I was interested in as well, because I went in with the term impersonator and then became really interested in what's the difference between impersonation and tribute, actually, and that there being something respectful and something feeling more imbued with an act of love in the aspect of tribute. That impersonation felt more, it feels more like that superficial idea of caricature and negative mimicry that, again, also I recognize we see on television with disability often being sort of mimicked and impersonated.
Caricatured, yeah, it's true. And actually in here, I mean, so this links back to the physicality, just to touch back into that again. I mean, for me, I mean, seeing your practice and your work over the years and the whole idea of the limbs, the lower limbs and the way it moves, that's not you mimicking, especially we're coming to this section. Is this still part of the bad boy section?
This was the very end of it. So at the end there was this little kind of shimmy that comes up into this kind of much more sort of aggressive, which is like, there was a tribute artist that did like this beautiful 3-minute evolution of Elvis's dance to me. And so from the 50s and this very wide, up on the toes, loose limbed stuff, in the 60s, he talked about how it pulled into this sort of crooner sort of vibe where everything's really restrained and the twist was in. So it's very in this sort of restrained little twist. But then the 68 special comes along and he gets in the black leather and it moves into this really quite aggressive and sharp movement with very wide stance. And so, yeah, the end of that solo is like this very sneaky little sort of reference through that evolution from the kind of late 50s, 60s into this 68. Sort of, yeah, different vocabulary. And then the 70s movement, Vicky introduces later in the show, is really different again. Like he really changed how he moved. And here, this is the other members of the ensemble beginning to join.
Is this the pelvising section?
This is a section, yeah, we call pelvising.
Tell me more.
Yeah, we're about to go into this, and at the moment we're sort of working with breath quite a lot. I work with breath as a sort of useful sort of tool for movement. I find it can help me make quite clear and specific movement that I struggle to find otherwise. I don't know if it's partly because I trained as a singer, but being able to sort of combine breath or voice with my body, I seem to be able to create control in my body much better. And so we take this way of working with breath that I learned from Jess Curtis here, and we turn it into this little sort of movement score where we move the movement. The work with breath just moves into moving the pelvis only. And obviously Elvis has there's this very famous sort of association with the pelvis. So again, this idea of being reduced to part of your body and objectified as part of your body was something that I felt that we as all the performers in this show identify as disabled. And that again felt something that we really knew and had experienced, being scrutinized for parts of our body.
It's beautiful. I mean, the way the lighting also frames that, and also, I mean, I know from previous conversations we talked about having 4 performers, but for me, with the interpreter there as well, it feels that there's 5 performers there, and she was absolutely brilliant. Got her name.
That's Amy Cheskin.
Yeah, and I know you specifically chose this recording because you really wanted to highlight that kind of inclusivity of your practice as well in that.
Yeah. I mean, I particularly loved what Amy did with this scene, actually, this sense of really giving a feeling of the breath. With the lighting, we were trying to sort of evoke a bit of this X-ray quality, a little bit of this, but I used to get a lot of X-rays. And also what was happening, sorry, I should have said earlier, but what we were doing was we were singing Heartbreak Hotel with breath. So the movement of the pelvis is actually each of us singing the first verse of Heartbreak Hotel. And for me, it's also this thing of like giving an audience time to see our bodies as 4 different performers, but also 4 maybe quite different bodies, and see that we move in slightly different ways, even though we're doing the same movement, but we're not trying to do the same thing. Like we're not trying to create comparison so much between us.
And this comes back. Sorry, this also comes back to your about technique, traditional techniques. That's basically based on non-disabled bodies, and to give that space for that for this vocabulary to be actually. When I was watching it, that's what was continuing to come mind. That the pelvis, you can see the pelvis moving, but it's also having its own language.
Yeah. Like we all move. We all have quite different potential with our, our different qualities of movement as well, even though we're kind of singing the same thing. And that was one thing I was interested in, like, there's this kind of cliche or this, one of the things of contemporary dance or dance is often unison movement. And I was like, how do I do a unison movement with 4 very different bodies, and how to work with unison in a way that isn't also making people sort of compare one to another in very direct ways. The comparison I want to make in the room is to the sort of elephant in the room of sort of Elvis or some mythological body, rather than, between ourselves so much. So it became more about other ways of unison, like qualities of movement or singing together became the kind of moments of unison. And so, part? Sorry, yeah. So this is us going into what I would call the introduction, even though we're probably like 10 minutes in. So most of my shows, the last 3 shows I've made, there's always some element of spoken introduction and welcome, and a sort of setting up of what I feel people need to know, and maybe permissions in the room. So before the Bad Boy solo as well, all of us as performers go out and talk to audience. Yes. We're out for a good 5-10 minutes before, just meeting people. How you doing? Just to let you know if you need to leave to go to the toilet or you need to leave. Generally, it's all fine. The toilets are over there. We might ask you to help us at times or join things, but it's totally, you can say no, thank you. And it's, for me, it's this thing of really breaking formality is a big part of access.
I definitely felt that, just to say, because in East London, where I'm from, there's a lot of working men's groups, and it kind of feels that space where people are welcomed, kind of go, yeah, the bar's over there, you can go there. And actually there was one bit where you went up to a lady at the front, and I thought you were asking to sit on a seat, but you were just having a chat with her, and I thought she was about to stand up. Yeah.
So there's also a little bit of maintenance that goes on as well. If somebody's moved and it's like, actually you've moved your seat where it's not supposed to be, and your bag's a little bit of a trip hazard, there's a little bit of that goes on as well, of like taking care of each other, the audience and the performers.
Even here, I mean, this bit when you're doing this section, which we're going to discuss a bit further, and that's an introduction. Yeah, do you want to talk more about that bit when we go into Love Me? Is it Love Me Tender?
Yeah, there was a wee bit of singing there of Love Me Tender, and then there's this 50s technique of playing with balancing with the mic, which is where I enjoy the sort of Elvis vocabulary reference of like this balancing on the toes, and I kind of enjoy the potential for movement to sort of interrupt voice as well, like the fact that being off like really can affect what I'm saying or how I'm singing, without me having to pretend that or perform it. It just does it.
It's an impulse as well, isn't it? It gives that. I can definitely feel that. And I'm not going to say choreographically, the way you position the crutches does give you that off balance. I mean, that was just beautiful just to watch that. How do you get to those moments? Is that through just, I mean, that was not discovered being at Wells's tribute. yeah, I'm pretty sure.
I didn't see anyone do that one.
Exactly. No. So what is the process for that?
I think it's for me, this balancing on the crutches in different ways, sitting on them is a real trademark move for me. So playing with this balance has always been a real geek obsession with me, and is where some of the movement vocabulary has really developed from, like balancing and playing with these almost really minute little gravity dances of balancing on the crutches and then balancing on my toes. So working always with these very small points of contact and really enjoying that, and being sort of, I think also the way that I'm interested in making choreography, it tends to come from these sorts of very actions that require you to be live. So the Bad Boys solo at the beginning is quite unusual for me to kind of recreate, to make moves that are quite specific and like repeat them. Kind of more traditional ideas of set choreography is quite unusual. The balancing with the mic is much more the sort of stuff that I tend to do more often, where it's like, I'm I'm really have to be rooted in my attention, and the attention gives it a sort of liveness. And because I also think as an audience member, I find that very engaging when somebody has to really, and it's what, you know, it's how sports based on and circus like that need to be, you can't let your attention disappear. You have to stay very rooted in the thing that you're doing. And so I enjoy sort of choreographic scores that are really rooted in an action in that way. Later on, there's a scene, we get Dan Daw is one of the performers, and he has a whole scene of sort of carrying water in this quite slightly precarious way up on his toes as well. And so those sorts of tasks I quite enjoy. When somebody really has to concentrate on what they're doing. There's a brilliant Tim Etchell's quote about it, about investment. If we see somebody really invested in an act, we become really invested.
We're also invested.
Yeah. As audience.
And actually, because I was watching that section going, and is that actually physically, I felt as if I became a little bit of Elvis, kind of joking, ooh, ooh, ooh. Yeah. But one thing that was beautifully maintained was that the text still, so that's the kind of, I would say that was a bit more formulaic, in that you had the text that was pretty much solid. It was just a score. So
there's a set welcome text that's basically trying to let people know that they're welcome for the evening, and sort of sets up these access sort of things, but in a sort of a sort of general welcome way of like, again, letting people know that they have permission to come and go from the room, letting people know that throughout the show we might invite them to join in things, or to come and, like we say, come and give us a hand, which we do. We ask audience members to come and carry things or hold like microphones
at the end. The microphone at the end, that's beautiful.
But also to make really clear to the audience, like, you can say no thank you, and that's absolutely fine. Like, there is not a compulsion to it's something I'm really interested in. I'm very careful. I'm curious about how to do, and I keep trying to learn to get better at it. But this thing of how to really create consensual interactions, because there's always a power dynamic fluctuating between a performer and audience, and just how to manage that. And I think it's like access for disabled people. It's all about information. It's about telling people, this is what's going to happen, this is what to expect, this is what I'm asking of you, and you have permission to say no, rather than sort of trying to surprise people. And I think the thing that I'm interested in with Jess Curtis, that I worked with a lot as well, is this thing of like, I think there are ways that you can do that without losing the magic and the mystery. That I think a lot of makers are like, I can't possibly tell people what's going to happen, it will spoil the show. And it's like, I think you can. I think this is where we have to be more creative, And
I've got to say, you do it wonderfully, knowing your practice for over 15 years now. And it's not even the instruction manual before the show. It's literally, it is the show. It is the show, and that's what you beautifully do. We're going to carry on watching the duration of what you selected, just to talk about the next part, which goes into so we've gone into the Elvis introduction. And then we're going to carry on. It's the pelvis-in. So once the pelvis-in stops.
So that section where I'm talking, where I do the introduction, what's happening in the background is that actually, so the other performers, Vicky changes into a physiotherapist costume and does a sort of transformation. So she takes this slightly physiotherapist role and sets the other performers up on these little tasks as sort of background movements, which are all rooted in physiotherapy, that tasks that we were given as children, most of us. So Dan is having to follow lines along the floor, walk along lines on the floor. He's having to carry cups of water. Tanya's going up and down the physio. We got a set of sort of physio stairs, which are a trademark of physio departments, and like the evolution of all different gaits of going up and down a set of stairs, and so those things are kind of happening in the background. And so it's the show is sort of couched in this idea of what it is to spend your life training to be like somebody else.
Right.
And so there's this sort of idea of the Elvis tributes that are training, you know, and work and learn how to be as like Elvis as they can. But then our sort of parallel is the idea that a lot of us in this show, particularly as children, were trained in a way to try and move more normatively through all these exercises and tasks. And so there's a bit, this is sort of referenced through the show of like what it is to try and train to be like some sort of mythical body that you don't have. And also that you've not chosen to be. The difference with a tribute artist is like they choose who they want to try and be. So the show kind of tries to sort of set that in the background.
And it gives that, I get this juxtaposition that you go into traditional conventional training schools, conservatoires, whatever, and then once you come out, you untrain, as they say. You try to learn how to move naturally as well. And actually for me, what you're given with this language and exploration of the crutches is actually giving Elvis his kind of training. Like, this is what you needed to have done, Elvis. You needed to get these moves first, or you needed to go through the breath techniques of the pelvis, but he just took the shortcut, didn't he?
Yeah, and I mean, it's lovely. All the voices of the tribute artists are through the show, and it's really beautiful hearing them like teach how to, you know, and also lots of them think that they don't know how to share it, but they do, you know, like hearing Darren talk about how the hands are and how to have the hands, or
Vicky's one. Who's Vicky's one?
Vicky was with Darren Jones.
Yeah, he was very, I remember his section.
He's wonderful, and he teaches sort of the 70s stuff to Vicky. But then also Dan talked to Des Perinara, Elvis Desley, and Des had been a professional dancer in New Zealand. And so he teaches like 5, 6, 7, 8, and really hardcore to count. And he learns everything like that, you know. And then Colbert Hamilton, who is Black Elvis, he's like, I just make it up and I flirt with the audience, and you know, and so there's lots of very different sort of approaches that are really beautiful, but the detail in some of them is really gorgeous. And the sort of love of what they do is really in it as well.
So yeah, just lastly, just to go into more the idea of the gender, and there's one beautiful moment just at the end, towards the end, where we'll see you singing "Why Men Say." If you'd like to share that bit with me, because that bit is just really beautiful. It brings the balance of the inclusivity as well into it. What was the line?
Oh yeah, well, I don't know if you have to beep things. So yeah, at the end, my scene at the end is that I sing I Can't Help Falling in Love with You is the song that I sing at the end of the show, and one of the first lines is, it opens with "Wise Men Say," and I changed the line to "Too fucking much," which luckily has gone down very well in almost pretty much every show, and yeah, it's
No, but it just really gives a place to all the politics and the inclusivity of your practice, and that's something I just really love about this work, and can't wait to see it live. Honestly, it's just I know definitely really ambitious and beautiful work, and hopefully we get to see it live again soon.
I hope so. Yeah, because also Dance Umbrella were really instrumental in making and co-commissioning the work and being part of making it possible. So I really hope we can bring it down south to you sometime. I hope so.
Fingers crossed. Just want to say a big, huge thank you. Thank you very much, Claire.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Absolutely to do the choreographer's cut with you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Freddie.